Yes guys, I'm currently in Rugeley and this video is about the postmaster of William Palmer. Anyway, before we get into that, we need to get into this. So, if you need a phone cover, a phone case, a phone screen, a protective screen, just a service on your phone, chargers, cables, what else we got, Sam? SIM cards, anything. But anyway, if you need anything, then Phone House, there you guys. Phone House and Horse Fair. Anyway, let's get into it, guys. When people talk about William Palmer, the focus usually falls on the poisonings, the trial and the execution. But Palmer didn't operate entirely alone. Around him were the people who trusted him, helped him, believed his explanations, and in some cases allowed their loyalty to pull them into serious trouble. One of the most interesting was Samuel Cheshire Jr., the postmaster of Rugeley, a man who had known Palmer since childhood and whose connection to him would eventually cost him his position, reputation and freedom. Samuel Cheshire was not an outsider who happened to become involved after John Parsons Cook died. When Cheshire later gave evidence in court, he said that they'd been muckers since school. The friendship continued into adulthood, and Cheshire admitted that he'd attended race meetings with Palmer on several occasions. He was not known as a gambler himself, but he moved within Palmer's circle, and appears to have accepted him as a trusted friend. Official postal records describe Cheshire as a bookbinder before he entered the postal service. In March 1847 he was appointed Deputy Postmaster of Rugeley, and the position required him to provide a bond of 300 quid. That was a good chunk of money, and it shows how seriously the role was regarded. A postmaster handled private letters, financial papers and communications that could contain deeply personal information. It was a position built entirely upon trust. By 1851, Rugeley's post office was operating from Cheshire's premises in Lower Brook Street. Cheshire later told the court that he lived at the post office itself, so this was not simply a building where he turned up to work each morning. It was his home and his business, most likely with the postal counter at street level, and living accommodation above or behind it. I haven't been able to find the exact building with the time that I allow myself to do these videos. Several 19th century properties still survive along Lower Brook Street, including the substantial former bank building. But there's currently no document proving that Cheshire occupied any of them. What can be said is that the post office stood somewhere along this street, around 300 or 400 yards from William Palmer's house. From there, Cheshire was close to Palmer's home, the centre of town and the Talbot Arms, where John Parsons Cook would spend the final days of his life. In November 1855, Samuel Cheshire travelled with Palmer to the races at Shrewsbury. This was the meeting where John Parsons Cook enjoyed a major success with his horse Polster. Now, Parsons Cook won a small fortune, but his victory brought him deeper into conflict with Palmer, whose own finances were collapsing under the weight of debts, forged signatures and failed racing ventures. Cheshire returned to Rugeley on the evening of the races. A few days later, on Saturday the 17th of November, he accompanied Palmer to the Talbot Arms to see Cook. Cheshire found him in bed, unwell. At this point, Cook was still alive, but his condition was deteriorating, and Palmer had already begun placing himself at the centre of his care and financial affairs. On Tuesday the 20th of November, between 6 and 7 in the evening, Cheshire received a message from Palmer asking him to come to his house, and Palmer told him to bring a receipt stamp. On the way there, Cheshire purchased a shilling's worth of stamps before continuing to Palmer's house. When he arrived, Palmer was waiting in the sitting room. He produced a written copy and asked Cheshire to prepare a financial document from it. Palmer claimed that Cook owed him money and wanted Cheshire to write him out an order directing the racing stakeholder, Weatherby, to pay 350 quid from Cook's winnings to William Palmer. Palmer also gave Cheshire an explanation for why he needed someone else to write it. He said Cook was too ill to prepare the document himself. While Weatherby knew Palmer's handwriting and would become suspicious if the order appeared to have been written by Palmer, Cheshire accepted this explanation and copied the document. It was a mad thing for the local postmaster to become involved in. A seriously ill man was supposedly transferring 350 quid to Palmer, yet the order was not written by Cook, and Palmer did not want it written in his own recognisable handwriting. Cheshire prepared it and left with Palmer, who said he would take it to Cook to be signed. The document reached Weatherby on the 21st of November, the same day John Parsons Cook died. It was later returned, but despite formal demands for it during Palmer's trial, the original was never produced in court. Cheshire therefore found himself connected to one of the most suspicious financial episodes in the entire case. He'd not written Cook's signature, and there was no evidence that he knew Cook was being poisoned. but it helped Palmer create a document designed to move money from Cook's racing account into Palmer's hands. After Cook's death, Palmer approached Cheshire again with another document which he claimed had been signed by Cook. This time he wanted Cheshire to add his name as a witness, and Cheshire refused. That refusal shows that he understood the seriousness of what Palmer was asking him to do. Cheshire had not seen Cook sign the document, and signing as a witness would mean that he claimed that he had. He told Palmer that he might later be called upon to give evidence about it, and that he wouldn't attach his name to something that he had not witnessed. Cheshire had already allowed friendship and trust to lead him into questionable behaviour, but at that point he drew a line. Unfortunately for him, it would not be the last time Palmer asked him to compromise his position. As postmaster, Cheshire controlled the arrival and distribution of letters passing through Rugeley. Palmer appears to have taken advantage of this relationship. Cheshire later revealed that Palmer sometimes collected letters addressed to his mother, and that Palmer and Cook occasionally collected one another's mail. In an age when letters carried financial instructions, legal communications, and private information, access to the post office could be extremely valuable in the eyes of a poisoner. During the investigation into Cook's death, a letter connected to the scientific examination of Cook's remains passed through Cheshire's hands. It contained important information about the medical evidence being gathered against Palmer. Cheshire unlawfully opened it and allowed Palmer to learn what the investigators were discovering before the letter reached its intended recipient. The exact wording used in different reports varies. Cheshire later tried to describe his offence as having merely read the letter, rather than opened it, but the court treated the matter seriously. It abused the trust placed in him as a postmaster, and used his privileged access to private correspondence for Palmer's benefit. In March 1856, Samuel Cheshire appeared before the Stafford Assizes. The jury made a strong recommendation for mercy, but he was convicted. Baron Bramwell sentenced him to 12 months' imprisonment with hard labour. Some later accounts incorrectly claim that he received 2 years, but contemporary reporting of the actual sentencing is clear. Cheshire received 12 months with hard labour. By the time William Palmer stood trial for the murder of John Parsons Cook, Cheshire was no longer the postmaster of Rugeley. He was a convicted prisoner, brought into court to give evidence against a man he'd known since school. His appearance must have carried considerable weight. Here was one of Palmer's oldest friends, a man who had attended the races with him, visited Cook during his illness and helped prepare the £350 order. He was also the man who had opened private correspondence for Palmer, and was now serving a prison sentence because of it. Under questioning, Cheshire described the events that had drawn him into the case. His evidence showed how Palmer had attempted to gain control of Cook's money, disguise his own handwriting, and obtain advanced knowledge of the medical investigation. The man who had tried to help Palmer was now providing the prosecution with evidence that made Palmer's behaviour appear more calculated. Samuel Cheshire's story is not straightforward. It was not simply an innocent postmaster ruined by circumstance, because he made conscious decisions which helped Palmer. He wrote the financial document, he opened private correspondence, he allowed a childhood friendship to override the duties of his office. But neither does the evidence show him as a full partner in Palmer's crimes. He refused to witness a signature he'd not seen. He later admitted what he'd done and gave evidence in court. There was no proof that he knew Cook was being poisoned or that he understood the full extent of Palmer's behaviour, until the events had already gone far beyond his control. What's mad about this story is the speed of Samuel's fall. In 1847, Samuel Cheshire had been trusted with Rugeley's post office. He was required to guarantee his honesty with a £300 bond, and 8 years later he was helping Palmer prepare a suspicious financial document. Within months he'd lost his position and was serving a sentence of hard labour. I've not been able to trace his later life in the time that I allow myself to make these videos. We know that he was around the same age as Palmer, as they went to school together. But there was also another man named Samuel Cheshire. I don't know exactly where he went after his release, whether he returned to Rugeley, if he resumed his work as a bookbinder, or where he was eventually buried. What remains is the story of a respectable local man whose friendship with William Palmer destroyed almost everything he'd built. Samuel Cheshire was trusted with the private correspondence of an entire town, but when Palmer asked for his help, that trust was placed second. In the end, Palmer was executed for the murder of John Parsons Cook. Samuel Cheshire survived, but he left the story as a disgraced former postmaster, remembered not for the years in which he served Rugeley, but for the letter he should have never have opened and the friend he should have never have trusted.